Welcome. Today is the 17th day of Av, the Yortzeit of Rav Steinsaltz, one of my teachers, and the 21st of August. And we're in the middle of chapter 16 of Shorish Mitzvos Tefillah in Derech Mitzvos Secha. So we're at the bottom of Kuf Kaf Gimel, about 8 lines from the bottom. So everything that we've said this a few times, but this is the first time he's going to say it. Why is it that in order to be able to reach this level called the infinite revelation of God, that is beyond names and beyond everything, why is it that the person has to first of all raise feminine waters, which we said means, we saw a few meanings of this. The first meaning was that I worked yesterday, and somebody came after we were talking yesterday, after this class yesterday, and he asked me, so why is it that you have to have mitzvos from the day before, meaning avodas habirurim? You have to have some clarification that you did yesterday, that you raised sparks yesterday, in order to reach this today when you say Shema. So I said the same thing as food. If you don't eat, then the next day you don't have energy. We're not talking about people who eat like a cockroach. They eat a lot of carbohydrates, like a normal person.
No, but the other one should don't have credit.
What?
The other one would eat a lot, should don't have credit.
I'm sad. And if you eat too much, you also don't have strength. But in any case, you have to do work the day before. What's the work? The work is to elevate. So when you look at it physically, the physical aspect is that person has to digest food, and then they have energy for the next day. Digesting the food is raising sparks in the physical sense, because you're extracting the energy. This has always been the picture. It's just changed. In the past, they used to think that the intestines cook the food. That was the parable that they used to use in the Middle Ages. In modernity, we don't say it cooks it; we say it chemically breaks it down. But you have to extract from those chemicals that you get. The body has to be able to absorb the energy that it needs, and the fats, and the lipids, and the proteins. And if you don't do that, you can't do anything the next day. The same is true when it comes to serving God spiritually. If you didn't do anything yesterday, then there's nothing to run on today. You're out of fuel. So you have to have something. Now, it doesn't have to be that it was in spirituality. It doesn't necessarily have to be yesterday. Sometimes it's even enough to remember that the day before or 10 years ago or whatever I did something. And you especially need that in order to lift yourself, in order to reach a place. But the whole point is that when you consider this whole process, the process itself begs the question of why is this the way it works? Why is it? Why isn't it that we just run forever? What is this thing? Why did God make it in such a way that things are what we call open systems, and that they have to replenish their energy? Otherwise they fall into disorder, entropy rises, and the system breaks apart. Why is this the way? This is how modern science says all of this. Why? There could have been many other ways to do it. The most important way, again, would have been, why is not everything infinite? Well, if it was infinite, so we have a certain problem. The problem would be that we said yesterday, if you're infinite, you're probably not a human being. Meaning everything that we call humanity would be gone. So that probably wouldn't work. But maybe there's other possibilities. Possibilities I can't even think of. Science can't even think of today. You have a nuclear submarine or a nuclear, what do you call them, aircraft carrier. They seemingly run forever. It's not true, they don't run forever. First of all, the fuel can run out. It's true that it'll take like 50 years, but it'll still run out at some point. But again, somebody had to prepare it. And then you run off of it for 50 years. Okay, it's a better system. It has its problems, it has its advantages, and so on. But in the end, everything that we know in this world is built in such a way that eventually it runs out of fuel and you have to replenish it. So it begs the question, why? Why does Hashem do it this way? So the question here is more important than the process. The process leads you to the question. And so what he's saying here is that you have to think about this a little bit in order to understand why this is what leads you to Hashem who's before all names. Why? Because the answer comes from that place. There's only one answer. What's the answer? So this is a famous thing from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov used to say that the highest name is Kacha. Kacha. Because. You say to someone because, they say that's not an answer. So he used to say,
It's the last answer.
it's not a real
It's not
answer.
an answer.
Yeah, you don't want to give me an answer. What do you mean, because? So there's a famous thing, I don't think the Baal Shem Tov said this. He didn't connect, I don't think he connected these two verses together, but he might have, because it falls on your tongue after you daven for a few years, you get this. Kacha is really, said the Baal Shem Tov, it's an acronym for Keter Kol HaKtarim, the crown of all crowns. So when I say because, I'm accessing Hashem's highest crown. We'll see in a moment what that means. But that connects to a verse that we say 3 times a day, Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo. Joyful are the people who have kacha. Who, this is their lot, that's really what it means, but shekacha lo, they have kacha. They have the ability to say because. Meaning, you're saying there's a limit on human understanding. Kacha really means there's a limit on human understanding. In the end, I have to say because. The question is because what? But just to be able to say because this is the way it is. And we'll see in a moment what that means. Lama yomru bagoyim. And he connected with another verse, which is why in Yehi Chavod we say Lama yomru hagoyim hayeh Elokeim. We say it in Hallel, sorry. No, we also quote in Yehi Chavod. Why is said by the non-Jews. They have the why. Now, it's not that we shun the why. We love the why also. Jews ask why all the time, and Torah wants you to ask why. But you have to know that the answer to why is because. Meaning, there's a series of whys, which at the end ends in the crown of all crowns, which is because. Now, because what? So he says, Lichora tamua. The question here is really, how can it be that through love, through affinity, through connection, I, a limited being, will be able to awaken the infinite. The infinite, which is not just infinite, asher en aroch mamash, there's nothing commensurate with it. There's nothing similar, there's nothing on the same scale. From here you see that there are different levels of infinity. That this infinity is on a different scale altogether. Now there's a whole discussion about this, we mentioned this once, from Cantor, and there's a whole discussion in Chassidus, did the Tzemach Tzedek predate Cantor in his discussion of infinity or not? Leave it for now. ונבהר שם שזה גופה שהמן יורר מד ועל ידי שכך עלה ברצונו הקדום. And it's explained there, and he means there, when he says there, I don't know where he means, but somewhere in me it says this, that the reason that it works this way, that I, through my work, am able to awaken the infinite, meaning to awaken the infinite to come down, to reveal a new revelation, is because what? This is what his primordial will judged to be the proper way. This is what he wanted. This is what he wants. Now, it doesn't mean that this is the end of the story, but here it is. For now, it is. There's other considerations we can say later, but here, this is how he ends it. He says, because this is what Hashem wanted. Now, we'll see in a moment why he says, Kach Allah. This is what came up in his primordial will. We'll see in a moment. But if you've been following what we're saying, you already know why he says because this is how it elevated in his primordial will. דהיינו, שהיה תחילה הכנה לזה ברצונו הקדום, שיהיה נמשך ומתגלה על ידי התערות דלתתא. Meaning that he prepared the infrastructure that this is the way it would work. Meaning when he built the world, this was the primary directive. That for me now to come and reveal more, not just what I revealed, says God, when I created the world, but to reveal beyond that, beyond the laws of nature. A person is sick, he needs a healing that is beyond nature. So Hashem has to reveal something, God has to reveal something new that's not within the confines of nature. The doctors say, I don't know. We've done all we can. So why are you still beseeching God? Because God can do more than nature. You want me to do something more than nature? I've set up the world in such a way that the mechanism is that when you have an awakening from below, I will come from above. And that's what it means that I pray. That's the whole essence of prayer. I'm coming from below. I'm moving feminine waters. Feminine waters is my energy rising. But still there needs to be some connection between what I am doing and what God is doing in return. What do we mean? That there has to be, this person will come and say, okay, so what does it matter what I do? Let's say I'm going to jump on my foot 10 times, on one foot. And that's my awakening from below. I'm going to jump up like this and say to God, look, I did my part. Now you do your part. So it says it's not connected. That's not part of what I set up, says God. What I set up is that there's a connection, but it has to be part of the same system. So it can't be you just make up something you want. You can want whatever you want. It's fine. In some ways, it has meaning, but it's human meaning. It's not necessarily part of the whole story that God set up in the world. What are the things that God set up in the world? The mitzvos, the commandments. They're the part.
Someone once told me that the Muslims are praying to the same power, but they're praying that power fulfill their will.
Right.
Ours is the complete opposite.
So, first of all, I want to fulfill your will, yes. But then I want you to fulfill my will. We also want the same. Right. So he says the first thing is that you have to fulfill my will. If you don't know what my will is, open the Torah up and see what my will is. It's that simple. It's not even difficulty. There's no difficulty in it. You open up the Torah, on every single page it tells you what Hashem's will is. And if you're hard of understanding, so open up the Shulchan Aruch. And that'll tell you, the Rambam. Talk to anyone. Now what's the idea here? There's a famous story from the Baal Shem Tov called the Kukuriku story, which in English would translate into the Kakel-Doo-Doo story. And it says that there was this simple farmer or shepherd boy who didn't know how to read at all. And he didn't understand anything about Yiddishkeit. Unfortunately, this is the situation with many, many Jews today. You can compare them to this simple shepherd who knows nothing at all. But he knows that there's Yom Kippur. And he goes into the shul, into the synagogue in Yom Kippur, and he sees everybody calling out, crying out, praying. And he doesn't understand what they're saying. He doesn't understand a single word in Hebrew. Doesn't know what they're doing. He's never been there, doesn't know. But he sees that everybody's crying out emotionally. So he says, I'll also cry out emotionally. How do I cry out emotionally? So he knows from the farm animals, he knows from the animals that he works with, how they cry out emotionally. He's never seen a human being cry out emotionally, but he feels the emotion. He himself, he doesn't know how to cry out emotionally because he wasn't around people even. So what does he do? So he starts yelling, "Kakal-doodle-doo, and then it's the Baal Shem Tov's shul. And after Yom Kippur, the Baal Shem Tov said, his prayer was the one that broke all the barriers. What's he saying? It says, you found once a siddur that says kukuriku, to say kukuriku. By the way, even people who started, since this is what he said, so it must be a holy name, and they found it, that there's a holy name like this, kukuriku. But not kakal-doodle-doo, but kukuriku, the way that we say it in Hebrew, what the chicken calls out. So what's this? So he's saying, in the end, it's not what it says to say, but the emotion is there. He means the same thing. He means to call out emotionally. It's not what the sages told me to say, but that's more like the prayer that we learned in the first chapter, that there's prayer d'oraisa from the Torah. The prayer from the Torah is that when a person needs something, he calls out to Hashem. So what if this is the only language he knows? The language of the animals. That's how he grew up. Okay, so he called out. It doesn't have to be the language of the sages. But it has to be the same type. It's akin to it. It's connected to it. It's of the same type. So that is what is instrumental in being able to reach this place where God has no name. Okay? So there has to be מעין ההתערותא דלילה. מאחר שההתערותא דלילה המשכת אור אינסוף הבלתי בעל גבור, הרי אין ארוך אליו ואין שייך לומר אפילו כטיפה מהים, כנ"ל אות י"ב. ואם כן איך שייך כלל לערך להמשכת אורו. So now he says, but really, even if you say it's the same thing, what do you mean by that? God is infinite, and I'm finite. So in the end, how are we going to bridge this? What is the infinite in man? You have to ask, I have to do an infinite act. So there's many ways of saying this, but the most important thing, we already said one of them, which is that the mitzvot, the commandments, do not follow human logic. They're not necessarily contradictory, but we don't do them because, even if they do follow some kind of logic, we still don't do it because of that. Why? We'll see in a moment, but the whole point is to go beyond my limits. I have different limits. I have emotional limits, I have intellectual limits, I have patience limits, I have all kinds of limits. For Hashem to appear in His unlimited essence, to shine down new revelation which has never been here, I have to do something similar. How do I do that? I have to tap into my infinity. Where's my infinity? So if somebody comes and says, "Oh, I'm just an infinite being. I'm luminant. I'm all light. I'm all beyond everything." Those are very nice words, but you're mincing words. It doesn't mean anything to anyone. Why? Because nobody knows what it feels like to be infinite. I don't know what it means like. Because I'm not. The moment I'm infinite, I'm already not a human being. So what do I do? So now he explains. He says, really, there are two types of love. Until now, he hasn't explained love this way. Until now, he said there were two types of love. He said the regular love and the avad b'chol mo'odecha. And he told it, b'chol mo'odecha, with all your might, means that you go beyond your limits. So what does that mean? So we explained it the way he explained it until now, which was you tap into the infinite. But what does that mean? Again, it's like, how do I experience something like that? And not be just full of fantasy, but a real thing. So he says, the way to understand this in human terms is like this. The first type of love, when a person can contain the love that he feels, he contains the emotions. He's very happy to see someone, and he hugs him and kisses him, but he's not going overboard. He's expressing his emotion. He's able to communicate it. That means the love is integrated normally into his emotional being. And then it's called ahava mityashevet belev. It's called love that dwells in the heart. It's able to integrate. And when you apply this to Hashem, it means the person wakes up in the morning and he says, yes, I want to be connected to Hashem. I want to be connected to the infinite. What does that mean? It means I know that I wash my hands and I say Modani, I wash my hands, I go to shul, I put on tefillin, I daven, all these things. This is what it means to have an integrated, normal relationship with Hashem. This is what, and then after I eat, I bench, and I know all these things. These are things that put me into a normal state of being. I have an affinity, I'm connected, but I'm not going overboard. But there's a second type of love. והשני, כשהאהבה היא בתגבורת גדול, דהיינו שעל ידי ההתבוננות בגדולת אור אינסוף ברוך הוא במהותו ועצמותו, דכולה קמי כלא חשיב ממש, ואיך שאפילו בחינת אדם כמונו כמי כמו עשייה גופנית ממש. כי הוא יתברך מרומם ונשגב מכל גדר מציאות נאצל ונברא, תתלהב ותתלהט הנפש באהבה רבה ועצומה, עד שאהבה זו לא תתיישב בלב. But there's a second type of love where the love cannot be contained in the emotions. There's no vessel to hold it. It overflows. And the person is besides themselves. They can't express it. There's no expression for it. There's no words, no names. All goes back to the same place. But I can't contain it, and I don't know what to do with myself. I'm so beyond my regular capacity. I'm so agitated, one would even say. I'm anxious. It's not normal. I have no vessel to hold this. That is the love that we're talking about. And this love is when it goes beyond my ability to hold it. Okay? I don't have a mitzvah that can hold it. There's no mitzvah.
What's the difference between that? Everyone has been emotionally overwhelmed at times.
Right?
So,
but by what?
That's you. Okay. You mean by the love of Hashem?
By love of Hashem. That it tells me my life the way it is. Kula kamei kelo chashiv. For me, it doesn't mean anything.
I understand.
It's not a bad thing for a person to feel from time to time that his life is meaningless. It's good, as long as it's normal.
Are we going to Mesiras Nefesh here?
That's Mesiras Nefesh. When a person feels
that overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. What is this life? What is going on here? But I don't want it to be from a bad place. Not because I'm in despair, but because really, what is the meaning here? He has to ask that question, and from time to time come up with the answer. It's meaningless. I don't have an answer for it. Who has an answer for it? The one who created me. That's the real answer to meaninglessness. I have to go beyond my answer, beyond my capacity. It's not just my mental capacity. It's not just even my emotional capacity. It's my existential capacity. I don't know what the meaning of life is. So Levinas, for instance, he gives it a very interesting thing. He based this on Martin Buber and his connection with Shoshani. And he came up with this idea that whenever you feel something like this, connect to another person. Connect to another person, which is very good, because that's exactly what it says in the Hayom Yom. That love for a fellow Jew is the pathway to love of God. What do you mean? So he built it into a whole philosophy, which he said he learned in the camps, but really he learned this from Shoshani, there's no question, and he learned it from Martin Buber, which he might have read before, and he was a prisoner of war, he wasn't in the concentration camps. Levinas, Emmanuel Levinas. So he has this whole idea that when you meet another person, you're meeting the infinite, because there's an infinite gap between you and him. We can develop this. It's a big Torah in his teachings. And I think it's very true. You can't always facilitate connecting to Hashem directly. Sometimes you have to do it through another step. We have the same thing the Baal Shem Tov taught in this week's Parsha, today's reading actually. I think it's today's reading. What does God ask from you? But that you love God. That you fear God. So the Gemara asks right away in the Dorim, what? It's a small thing to fear God? To be in awe of God is that's all God is asking from. What do you mean that's all? That's everything. That's beyond my capacity anyway. It says, no. If you are before Moses, it's a small thing to fear God. What does it mean? I'm not Moses, so what does that help? I've never seen Moses. So says the Baal Shem Tov, really what the Gemara is saying, it's a two-stage process. First you fear a tzaddik, then you can fear God. If you don't know how to fear a human being, you don't know how to fear Hashem. Now, don't fear Napoleon. Fearing Napoleon or fearing, president, whatever, it's very nice, but it's got nothing to do with fearing God. Why? Because you're fearing the wrong thing. You're fearing punishment, you're fearing death, you're fearing retribution, you're fearing shame, all these things. To fear Hashem is to be in awe of Hashem. That's fear of Hashem. It's awe of God's greatness. So if you understand God's greatness, if you can understand that, I can't understand it, the person says, okay, so understand what it means to be a tzaddik. Have a tzaddik that you know and see what a different type of person looks like. Not like you, a person who's on a completely different level. And this is where we need to tell Rosh Steinsaltz's famous story. I'll retell it again in honor of his Yortzeit, that he told me many times. Why can't somebody who grew up in Jerusalem be a chassid of the Rebbe? Because in Jerusalem there's all these great rabbis. So you think he's another rabbi. But he says the truth is that it's like a person who grew up in Holland, and in Holland he says there's this place that has a 30-meter high hill, and they call it the Hills of the Darkness. Because it's 30 meters high, 30 yards high. He says, and if you grow up in Holland, you think this is as high as mountains go. So he says, like in Jerusalem, you think this is as high as rabbis go. And then when you go to the Everest, you say, oh, wait a minute, there's a different scale altogether. Now, what you experience there, experience that relative to Hashem. So it's a two-stage process. Okay, so we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow.
Maybe I just didn't